All right, let's just dive right into this, guys. There is a totally explosive rumor sweeping through world football right now, and it's all fueled by a cryptic little popcorn emoji tweeted by Real Madrid legend Iker Casillas. The rumor? Jose Mourinho, you know him, the self-proclaimed special one, might actually be plotting a blockbuster return to a severely crisis-stricken Real Madrid. But listen, today in this explainer, we aren't just going to gossip about sports drama. We're looking at the hard data, the intense locker room culture, and the massive, literally billion-dollar economic potential at stake for one of the world's most valuable brands. We're going to bridge the pure emotional turmoil of this mega club with rigorous data science to see if Mourinho's legendary methods actually still hold up in the modern era. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the Real Madrid crisis, controlling the locker room, the 95-game shelf life, debunking parking the bus, and finally, adapt or perish. Let's get right to it.
Section 1. The Real Madrid crisis. A systemic failure.
Just look at the sheer scale of the collapse happening under manager Álvaro Arbeloa. He stepped in to try and spark a rebound after Xabi Alonso really struggled, but man, the team has just flatlined. I mean, they're a massive 9 points behind Barcelona in La Liga. They got knocked out of the Kings Cup, and they just suffered this really shocking elimination from the Champions League by Bayern Munich. So now they're staring down a second consecutive completely trophyless season. And you have to understand, for a club with Real Madrid's astronomical standards and, frankly, massive economic obligations, this isn't just a simple slump. No, this is a systemic failure of epic proportions. Section 2. Locker room control. Egos versus hierarchy. Which brings us to a pretty stark warning from Mourinho himself. This was directed at Real Madrid right after that Champions League exit. He pointed directly at these super fragile team dynamics surrounding absolute superstars like Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. He said, and I quote, "You can't have two kings in the same team without structure, without rules, and without hierarchy." He noted that after big defeats, these massive egos clash, and the dressing room culture just completely fractures. And honestly, the relationship with the press usually goes downhill right along with it. The really crucial point here is the massive contrast in management styles. It's the difference between a gentle hand and an armored fist. Recent, quote-unquote, softer managers, well, they've really struggled to bind this team together. Because when you have unprecedented talent and name value, it simply doesn't guarantee cohesion. The players just run the show. On the flip side, you have the iron fist approach. Florentino Perez, the club president, reportedly loves a manager who can dominate the locker room with absolute authority, line up the stars in order, and basically push the squad into what they call war mode. That right there is exactly why Mourinho's name is back on the table. So, okay, we've clearly established exactly why the Real Madrid board might want him back to restore order. But we've really got to ask, is the special one actually a long-term fix? Let's bring in the data to see if his old-school methods actually still work in today's game.
Section 3. The 95-game shelf life. A measurable pattern.
You know, for years, there's been this whole narrative in football media about Mourinho's tricky third season. But check this out. Data from Run Repeat, covering literally all 909 competitive matches of his career, confirms it is not just a media narrative. It's a highly measurable pattern. Think of it like clockwork. Season 1, he improves the team, challenges for the title. Season 2 is his absolute peak. He wins leagues, dominates Europe. Think about his trouble with Inter Milan, or that historic 100-point season during his first stint at Real Madrid. But Season 3, it's almost always a complete team implosion. And it's usually accompanied by totally toxic relationships with the press, calling out his own players in the media, and a totally fractured locker room culture. We literally saw this exact cycle at Porto, Inter Milan, Real Madrid, and Manchester United. And the data actually pinpoints exactly when this implosion happens. 95. That is his exact mathematical shelf life in games before his win rate irreversibly declines at a club. Whether it was game 89 at Real Madrid, game 84 in his return to Chelsea, or game 116 at Manchester United, right around that 95-game mark, the magic wears off, the locker room harmony completely shatters, and the win percentage just plummets. And what you really need to take away from this is that it's not just isolated club-by-club implosions anymore. His overall career performance is steadily trending in the wrong direction. Over his entire career, his win percentage is an incredible 64.47%. That's elite. But in only one of his past 6 seasons has he actually managed to beat that average. The data suggests a pretty undeniable overall decline. Section 4. Debunking parking the bus. A data-driven study. So, moving on to tactics.
Mourinho famously popularized the term parking the bus. It's a strategy designed to heavily fortify the defense, sitting deep to neutralize stronger attacking opponents. It's super pragmatic, it's cautious, and it relies heavily on formations like the 5-4-1 or the 4-4-2. But the ultimate question for us today is, does this mathematically translate to winning football matches? To figure this out, we're going to explore an advanced double machine learning study published in Archive, which analyzed over 22,000 professional matches.
All right, let's look at the actual science. The researchers used double machine learning to calculate beta coefficients for goal differences. Now, that's just a fancy mathematical way of finding the true isolated impact of a formation, totally stripping away the actual talent of the players. They separated the tactics from the team's strength. And honestly, the results are staggering. The data shows absolutely zero statistical evidence that defensive formations increase a team's winning potential or goal output. None. In fact, out of all the matchups, the only statistically significant advantages for goal difference belonged to offensive formations, like the 4-3-3 and the 4-3-3-1, when they faced defensive setups. So parking the bus might frustrate the heck out of your opponents, but it doesn't actually give you a statistical edge to win.
And if we look at possession data from that exact same study, the picture gets even clearer. The numbers prove that defensive setups consistently surrender ball control. Offensive setups like the 4-3-3 hold a massive mathematical advantage in possession. Which makes sense, right? When you park the bus, you willingly give up the ball. And as we literally just covered, you don't even gain a scoring advantage from making that sacrifice. So, to quickly summarize the machine learning study, defensive formations neutralize threats, yeah, but they just don't increase wins. Offensive formations offer statistical advantages in both possession and corners. Also, and this is super interesting, the study found that red cards are completely unaffected by tactical formation, meaning disciplinary issues are purely behavioral, not tactical. Why all this matters is pretty simple. It mathematically proves that Mourinho's reliance on rigid defensive pragmatism might be entirely statistically outdated in the modern fluid game.
Section 5. Adapt or perish. Two different paths.
Now, let's look at the contrast between Jose Mourinho and Carlo Ancelotti. This is fascinating because they both came from the exact same golden era of football. But while Mourinho has stuck to tactical rigidity, defensive pragmatism, and dictatorial locker room control, which, as we know, often ends in bitter media wars and press conference meltdowns, Ancelotti took a totally different path. He embraced tactical flexibility. He uses calm authority, he deflects media pressure away from his players, and he actually adapts to the squad he has. And that approach has led to sustained success and recent Champions League glory. It perfectly shows two very different paths for veteran managers in today's football landscape. And there is a really profound irony in all of this. Going back to Mourinho's own recent advice to Real Madrid about their clashing egos, he said, "Talent helps you win matches, but harmony helps you win titles." It's an incredibly true statement, but it's also deeply ironic coming from a manager whose entire 95-game mathematical shelf life is literally defined by a complete loss of locker room harmony and eventual team implosion. So as Real Madrid contemplates what looks like a totally desperate move to bring back the ultimate disciplinarian to tame their superstar dressing room, we are left with a massive question. Will Mourinho adapt his philosophy to the fluid, data-driven modern game? Or is the era of the dictatorial bus-parking manager simply over? Has the game of football actually evolved past this special one? It is such a fascinating clash of human ego, massive financial stakes, and hard, objective data. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, guys. I'll catch you next time as we continue to break down the world's most complex stories.